Acknowledging the start of Kwanzaa today, happy holidays to all who are joining us from the Americas, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. My name is Bruce Murray, and I serve as chair of our Democrats Abroad Global Progressive Caucus, along with our vice chair, Sue Alksnis. I invite you to share in the chat where you vote, where you are tuning in from, and a racial justice issue that is especially important to you. Today, we focus on eradicating the remnants of slavery in our state and federal prison systems, which is enabled by the 13th Amendment to the US Constitution. While intending to abolish slavery, it includes an exception, quote, as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, end of quote. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund asserts that constitutions in 19 states to this day explicitly permit either slavery, involuntary servitude, or both as a punishment for a crime. It also notes that Black Americans are incarcerated at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans. A report published by the American Civil Liberties Union in June of 22 found about 800,000 prisoners out of the 1.2 million in state and federal prisons are forced to work, generating a conservative estimate of 11 billion annually in goods and services, while average wages range from 13 cents to 52 cents per hour. ProDA would like to thank the leaders of our Democrats Abroad Reparations Task Force for organizing our meeting, enabling us to learn more about this injustice with serious racial implications and what we can do to eradicate it. We also would like to thank the Global Black Caucus and its chair, LaDonald Jazz Moore, for co-sponsoring our event. We are especially eager to learn what the Reparations Task Force Chair, Antar Keith, and our special guest experts will share with us about forced prison labor and involuntary servitude, the racist roots of these practices, how and where forced prison labor is still legal, and what efforts took place in the midterm cycle to end the slavery loophole. First, our ProDA Monthly Mondays for Progressive Minds co-leader, Betsy Ettore, will describe our agenda. Take it away, Betsy.
Thanks very much, Bruce. Today, our monthly Monday discussion will center on efforts to end forced prison labor known as the slavery loophole. During the 2022 midterms, voters in 5 states weighed in on ballot measures calling to amend their constitutions to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude, including in cases of criminal punishment. The ballot initiatives passed in Tennessee, Vermont, Alabama, and Oregon. However, in Louisiana, the state with by far the highest prison population, Amendment 7 was rejected with over 60% of the vote. During our discussion, we will hear from national advocates and Louisiana-based activists about the impact of forced prison labor, the next steps after the failure of Amendment 7, and the need for reparative action to address the ongoing legacy of chattel slavery. We have the pleasure of having as our speakers Terrence Wynn, founder of Priorities, Intentions, Practical Exchanges, or PIPES, and Kenneth Henry, Legislative Director of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, NCOBRA. Any questions you may have will be taken after each speaker, and we ask that you use * hand up in the chat box to be recognized to unmute and ask brief questions. You are also welcome to type questions in the chat box if that is more accessible for you. Closed captioning is on, and we ask anyone using visual assistance to please send the chat privately to Sue Alksnis so that we can ask attendees to refrain from using the reactions and emails function, which can be distracting when using visual description features. I have the pleasure of handing over to Antar Keith, the chair of the DA Reparations Task Force, and an active member of the Progressive Caucus, who will now be introducing the topic. Over to you, Antar.
Thanks, Betsy. As the late Black journalist Glenn Ford once said, racism is hard to measure, but its effects can be quantified. So much so that we can, without delving into subjective opinion, simply let the numbers do the talking for us. The American prison population is by far the largest on the planet in both sheer numbers and proportion of citizens locked up behind bars, holding over a quarter of the world's prison population. According to Mr. Ford, our prison police and custodial forces alone dwarf most militaries in the modern world, making America, in his words, the undisputed superpower of mass incarceration. Furthermore, nearly half of the American prison population is Black, despite Black Americans only constituting a mere eighth of their country's population. Think about that now. An eighth of a nation's population, our nation, supplies nearly half of the single largest prison population on Earth. Since Americans make up a quarter of the world's prison population, this means that 1 out of every 20 prisoners on the planet are African American, not just Black, but directly tied to the legacy of US chattel slavery. This is no coincidence. The 13th Amendment exists as a holdover, a direct link with America's origin as a slavocracy, and like a conduit to the 400-year-old nightmare of forced labor, leaves a long-thought-dead system fully intact, a system that preys on the descendants of those who suffered deprivation after deprivation to the tune of billions of dollars. My father, Bill Keefe, was fed to this machine not once, but 2 times, framed for murder while a minor. He was sent to New York's Elmira Reformatory, which in the age of American apartheid, or Jim Crow, functioned as little more than a prison for poor Black and brown children, employing brutal military-style discipline to maintain order. Elmira's children were subject to horrific conditions and human rights violations, up to and including psychological torture via a sensory deprivation chamber. Such evil cannot happen in perpetuity, though. Then, as now, such structures must sustain themselves. In his Pulitzer Prize-winning text, The Nickel Boys, novelist Colson Whitehead explores how such Jim Crow-era reform schools subjected youths to forced labor as a means of generating prison income. Once freed from such systems, survivors can never truly live outside the carceral grasp, as their skills rarely translate to workable trades. Knowing this firsthand, my father created the Malcolm X Arts Foundation in 1977 to teach trades to former inmates to help break the cycle of recidivism, but his own nightmare continued. Shortly after I was born, my father was re-incarcerated due to a false claim of firearm possession, sent to the infamous Rikers Island. He was put to work in the Gulag library system. Luckily, he survived this experience too, and I was able to grow up with him in my life, but not without the effects of his incarceration. As a result of my father's circumstances, my life trajectory, access to wealth, and chances for success in life were heavily pulled down. Mass incarceration directly impacts Americans like me, even if we've never been arrested. As a result of our socioeconomic status, Americans like myself find ourselves under a glass ceiling health-wise, educationally, occupationally, and environmentally. The only way we can escape the built-in systemic limitations imposed on us as a result of our intergenerational harm is to leave America and go to a country where we can finally thrive. Know that I did not come to Germany merely for an adventure or because I was curious even. I came because I could not breathe in America any longer. Living in intergenerational poverty would have been my destiny were it not for the opportunities opened up to me by moving to Germany. All of a sudden, my talents and abilities were desired, marketable, and I could ascend to a new station as a teacher in Germany. My experience shows that the limitations we Black Americans experience are baked into our society and are not inherent deficiencies on the part of a people trapped in a prison industrial complex. Yet many like me are not able to leave as I did, which is why, even though abroad, we must continue to fight to end slavery in America. Understanding the slavery loophole and how to close the doors on this nightmare once and for all is what brings us here today. Caitlin is here to introduce our first guest to discuss his own experience with this loophole. Caitlin, please.
Thank you, Antar. Yes, it's my pleasure now to introduce our first guest, Terrence Wynn. And I had the honor of meeting Terrence last August at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, where he was testifying before the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination on his experiences in the US carceral system. Terrence is a community activist from Shreveport, Louisiana. He's a powerful advocate for people currently and formerly incarcerated, as well as leads programs for Louisiana youth as founder of an organization called Priorities, Intentions, Positive Exchanges, or PIPES. Thank you for joining us today, Terrence, and we would be honored if you would share with us your story and some of your firsthand experiences in Louisiana's prison system so we can fully understand what is at stake when we talk about the need for prison reform and ultimately abolition. Terrence, the floor is yours to share whatever you feel comfortable sharing with us today. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Thank you all for having me. My story starts like this. At the age of 16, I was a high school student. I was an honor roll high school student. And on Christmas night of 1989, I was attending a fraternity party. And me and a guy got into it. And afterwards, some shots were fired from other people, and I fired a shot. I hit the guy that I got into it with, and he survived. And another guy was killed. And by him being killed, he was shot 3 times. I only fired 2 shots. And one of my shots hit the guy that was living. So they transferred the intent. They gave me the murder, transferred the intent, and tried me as an adult. I went to trial. And I was found guilty of second-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder, and I received a life plus 25-year sentence at the age of 16. And I went to Angola, which was, at the time that I went to Angola, it was the bloodiest prison in the United States. So I went from being an honor roll high school student to, when I made it to prison, it was cotton season, to having to live out the history that I was taught in textbooks about Blacks, the origin of Black people here in the United States of America. So it was cotton season, and I'm a young Black guy going to prison. I rebelled. I said, I'm not picking cotton. And so security at that time, they was really, really violent. So security jumped on me a couple of times, but I refused. I refused to be broken, and I refused to go to subject myself to being a slave. And so I didn't go. And so I went to lockdown. And lockdown is 23 hours of being in a cell by yourself. And you only have 1 hour to be out the cell by yourself. You walk up and down the hall to exercise, and you take a shower. 23 hours in a cell drives most people crazy. And it had all implications that it was going to drive me crazy. Several times the cell closed in on me, where I literally had to call for an ambulance because it was like it was suffocating me and I was going to die in the cell. By no means of anything happening in the cell. It's just when you that much isolation and solitude, it would drive the average mind to doing things that you don't know that your mind would do. And I'm a kid fresh out of society, so I'm not prepared for this form of living. So when I come back to population, it's a different season. It is a season for you to just cut grass. but in your mind, you're not trained to think that this is also slavery because you're doing it for nothing. So I'm working, but I refuse to work. You know, I just had in my mind that I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna do my time like this. And I'm reading. So when you're in sales, only thing that you can do is read. So I'm continuing my education. I did something that no other prisoner has ever done. I received my GED within 6 months because I'm fresh out of school, and I was a smart kid. So I got my GED 6 months after I had made it to prison, and I scored the highest on my GED test. But they're constantly trying to put me in the field and make me work, and I just refuse to work. I refuse to do that. And then I could see, because it's like I went to prison with 9 other guys. 3 of those guys were white, and the rest of us was black. And those white guys never had to go in the field, not one day. All of us had to go in the field. Those guys were given jobs. Well, one of them became a clerk, which he did all the filing and everything. The other one got a job in the laundry. Well, you can make a decent form of living, and the other one got a job in the library. And so we had guys that came with me that was qualified to have those jobs, but security was like, no, you're not going to get that job. You're going in the field. Because we actually had a librarian that came to prison with me. You know, he just got in trouble. He got in trouble with a woman, and he came to prison, but he wasn't qualified in prison because coming through the gates of Angola during this time, security showed you that they was racist towards you. They didn't hide it. They was gonna call you the N-word, and they was gonna dare you to feel any way outside of less than a human being to them. If you felt like you was dignified and you was a human, they was gonna brutally beat you and attack you. And at this time, security was doing so many treacherous things. They was putting you in young guys in cells with guys that was barbarians, and they were raping guys and stuff. And when you look at it, it's just a continuation of this slavery that's going on, because the mentality was strictly to treat you like a slave, and it wasn't a thing that's hidden. So like today, in comparison to then, it's like real modest, and you will see guys just bucking, and security are kind of like cater to them as opposed to when I came. So guys now will say, I'm not going to work, and they'll be like, they'll try to compromise with them. But then it was slavery. It was brutal. And you know, you had no way of shielding yourself from the sun. We was working in 115-degree temperatures a lot of times. And if the horse didn't fall out, you was gonna work. Only way you would not work is if the horse had to fall out. And you just gotta work up under these harsh conditions. And it could be freezing. You still was gonna work. So you're gonna work, I don't care how bad the weather is, but it'll take a certain point or for a certain animal to feel the pain of that weather for you to not work. So for a 17-year-old kid's mind, you know, to have to take on these conditions and these changes is really a harsh thing, because you just left society where society doesn't recognize you as an adult at the age of 16 or 17. You can't do anything. You can't do anything as an adult. But here you're in the prison system with hardened criminals, people that's been in prison for a lot of years, or people that have been in prison a lot of times. They're adults, and they think like adults, and they think in a way that's real brutal. And you gotta live through this and this slave mentality, because it's like you threw in these dreadful situations with people that's gonna do anything by any means necessary to survive. It's like you just throw a bone and a pack of hungry dogs, and they're gonna attack each other to get to that bone. And it's like throwing a kid in these situations and everybody looking at you in strange ways. And it's like everybody gonna do what they can do to get on top. And so you'll start seeing the classification of human beings within those situations. And you'll start seeing the Sambos, which history would call it Uncle Tom. If any of y'all are recognize what Uncle Tom cabinet is and how Black people changed to make Uncle Tom the bad person in history. And when we degrade another Black man, we'll say he's Uncle Tom, but not knowing that Sambo was actually the worst of those two. But you'll see guys in prison with these Sambo mentalities. It's like a broken spirit. And I mean, you see slavery as soon as you walk in Angola, because you're gonna see the horses, you're gonna see the guns, you're gonna see the big mouthful of tobacco, you're gonna hear all of the jargon, and you're gonna know that, man, you done been taken back in time. And you're gonna hear Black guys calling the white man on the back of the horse, yes sir, boss. The whole slave vernacular comes out, and it's like, no sir, boss, can I do this, sir? And these guys are coming from your predominantly Black cities, New Orleans, Shreveport, Baton Rouge, and you be like, man, what's going on here? And your mind is trying to grasp, like, what's going on? And in my 17-year-old mind, I'm saying, I'm never gonna be like this. I'm never gonna be a broken spirit like that, where you'll see guys standing up like a man in front of you, but soon as a white guard come by, they slump over and they won't look them in the eyes. And you saying, I'm not gonna let my spirit be broken like that, because I have read that this is how Black people are supposed to be towards white people. And I'm saying, I'm never gonna be like that. So when it's me talking to security or anything, I'm telling them, man, you better not call me no N-word, because I don't use that word, never use that word. And I'm like, I'm a man. I'm gonna be a man. Whatever you do to me, however much you beat me, you're not gonna make me say I'm Toby. I'm gonna be Kunta Kinte, regardless to how you do whatever you do. You just gotta kill me. And that was my mentality, and that's the mentality I kept, and that's the mentality that made me survive prison. And that's the mentality that made me never accept the role of being a slave. That's the mentality that made me educate myself more so while I was in prison. Because every day it's a thing to break your spirit. It's something to break everything that you stood for in society. It's to break you down. And you know, it already breaks relationships. Families will leave you while you're in prison, because that's what it's designed. That's the design of prison. So it's a tragedy. It's a tragic story to see it. And when you look at it from the society standpoint, you can kind of understand Black people allowing slavery to still exist on the ballot this year. And you can understand how certain Sambos helped that happen, because they advocated against taking slavery out, because their masters told them, keep slavery in the Constitution in Louisiana because it's better for you as a people. And instead of them looking at the whole overall picture to say, when has slavery ever been great for humanity? And Black people just accept it. I mean, I know most of y'all are in different countries, but y'all would have to come to Louisiana to really understand and see why it stayed in the Constitution, because of the mentalities there. It's like a broken spirit. It's like so many Black people here are broken as a whole. And so you don't see anything wrong with not changing it. It's like, you know, like I could break down history to people all the time. And like when we was just going through the campaign to remove slavery from the Constitution, and I would give them a history lesson, like to say that when the two nations went to war, when Abraham Lincoln and them decided that they was going to go to war with the South, I said, before Abraham Lincoln decided he was going to go to war with the South, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. How many of y'all feel like they're free slaves? And you got a lot of people feel like slavery was supposed to have ended at that time. And so I come back and say, how do you think he could have ended slavery by signing the Emancipation Proclamation when the South was his own country and the North was his own country? I said, you understand that this is the reason why the war is going to go on. I said, the South had their own president. I said, so how can Abraham Lincoln free a group of people that didn't belong to the United States of America? And so people to look at it like, yeah, I learned this. You're right. I said, so the Emancipation Proclamation was just a proclamation. It never stood in the South. I said, yet they went to war. I said, so at the end of the war, and I'll show people this. I said, this is where black people and white people differ from. I said, at the end of the war, the North asked the South, what can they do for them, even though they had won the war? And the South told them they wanted to continue slavery. And the North told them, no, we ain't gonna continue. You can't tell us what you want us to do in that sense because we just beat y'all. So whatever we want to do in that, we're not gonna do that. So the South, they said, you gotta come better. So the South said, all right, let's continue it under the guise of prison. If they commit a crime, they go to prison, they become slaves. And the North said, okay, we'll do that. That's amended. So the 13th Amendment came into existence the same year that the war ended. And so slavery continued. So the South actually won. So that's why you'll see a Confederate flag with pride in Louisiana, or in the South, period. You'll see a Confederate flag, and nobody celebrates losers. But here in the South, they don't see themselves as being losers in that war because they got what they wanted. Slavery continued. So now we got the black laws coming, the black codes come into effect. So where you can arrest a black man for anything, and that black man goes to prison. Here's where the non-unanimous jury comes into effect, which plays a hard part in Louisiana. If y'all understand what the non-unanimous jury is anybody that's been convicted of a crime and up under a jury of 10-2 or 11-1. So the United States Constitution said when you get found guilty, you have to be found guilty by a unanimous jury. They mean all 12 jurors have to say you're guilty. But in Louisiana, they had a convention. In this convention, a former general from the Confederate Army told his constituents this. He told all those in attendance this: man, slavery is over. Black people don't have the rights to vote now. That means that they're going to be put on juries. We can't never make them be equal to a white man. So when they go on the jury, if 11 white people say that a black person is guilty and one of them say he's not, he's still going to be found guilty. If 10 white people say he's guilty and 2 blacks say he's not, he's going to be guilty. If 9 people say it and 3 blacks say he's not guilty, he's going to be guilty. So that became law. In 1973, the 9-3 verdict went out the window. So it was just 10-2, 11-1. So in 2020, the United States Supreme Court finally opened their eyes and say, no, that's illegal. That's a constitutional violation. You can't do that. Yet in Louisiana, it hasn't been ruled retroactive, so it continues. Now, all these are direct linkage to slavery continuing because people are going to prison. Now you can't with a 10-2 or 11-1 jury verdict. So slavery still continues in Louisiana because slavery is still big money. And people here don't see that it's a bad thing because people here feel like, I'm not going to go to prison. I'm not going to do anything that's going to take me away. So it doesn't matter to me if slavery exists or not knowing that it affects them regardless. And so guys are still in prison. Guys in Louisiana go to prison probably way more. I don't know the actual numbers, but we go to prison at a higher rate than in any other city practically, because it's easier to lock us up here. And they want us to be locked up here because we help the continuation of slavery go on. So that's why you have guys at 16, 15 being tried as adults and going to prison. And most times those guys will be Black people because the crime has already been committed. Some of us will go to prison innocent. I went to prison actually innocent because I actually didn't murder anybody. When it was always revealed, I actually didn't murder anyone, but I did 30 years of my life in prison. I went to prison at 16 and I was released at the age of 46. So I'm back in society and I'm still functioning like a 19-year-old because I've been free for 3 birthdays instead of functioning as a 46-year-old. I'm still going through things to overcome being incarcerated for such a long period of time. And it's a struggle every day. I smile through life. Everybody see me. I got a real upbeat and positive spirit, but behind closed doors, I still suffer. It's things that I'm still overcoming. It's fears that I'm still having to face that people 46 years old that's never been incarcerated don't have to face. And so I'm still growing up. I'm still catching up. And I'm still every day fighting the mentality of slavery because I see it so much now in society. As I probably wouldn't have never saw it had I not went to prison and studied and learned. But slavery exists in society practically more than it does in prison because people here accept it and they don't see it because it's been beaten into them not to see race as an issue. When race is always an issue here. It's never not an issue, but it's been beaten into you not to see it and not to say it. So we don't much want to have a conversation about it because people think it doesn't exist, but it exists. So slavery here continues because people just accept it. People just don't believe that it exists, but it's right in front of them. So I don't want to take up any more time. So thank y'all for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Terrence. We really, really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and we're really grateful that you're here with us. And we would also love to hear, if you still have time, some more about your organization, Pipes, how it got started, and what kind of work that you're doing to provide support to people who are trapped in the U.S. prison system in Louisiana, and also the youth programs that you engage in.
Whenever you want me to, I can do it. You want me to do it now? You want me to wait?
Now is good, I think, if you're, if you.
Okay, Pipes started while I was in prison. Pipes stands for Priorities, Intentions, and Practical Exchanges. Pipes was breaking down because of the ghetto to prison pipeline. So I just came up with Pipes while I was in prison. And when I came home, I implemented it. And I got a lot of formerly incarcerated, where everybody is formerly incarcerated as a part of Pipes. And it's our priority to teach and educate and advocate for kids to do the right thing and to help people to understand what's going on. It's our intentions to right the wrongs. We've done things wrong, so we want to right those wrongs. And we want to make sure that we right the wrongs of a kid because we teach them the wrong thing. The practical exchange is to exchange all those wrongs for right. It's to exchange all the hate that we have towards one another for love. It's to not accept things, to be an acceptance of things, and to be accepting of change. So that's what PIPE stands for. So what we take is, we help kids who've been in trouble. We have a support group. It's the only one, probably the only one in the state of Louisiana. It's modeled after AA. So those that's formerly incarcerated come to the support group, and we do the same things that AA do, but we do it for those that's formerly incarcerated. And we understand that we might say we don't have anything going on with us mentally, but everybody that comes through prison, and we've done decades in prison. We know that we have problems, and we know that we can't talk to anybody about that problem but somebody who understands it. So we understand one another, so we speak about our problems, and we love on one another, and we support one another, so that we don't make the mistakes that'll lead us to go back to prison. So we are our biggest support unit, and that's what we do. The name of my support group is OKQ, Outstanding Kings and Queens. And we just break down, we take away the bad from us, and we become kings and queens within our moments and our elements. And we pass on these teachings to the youth, so that they in their development stages, that they can develop better habits, better thinking, and so that they could be better people coming up. So that's everything with pipes. But it was something else you asked, so I want to just give you. We also help the homeless. We feed the homeless once a week. So we just and we do this. We help those that's in prison that shouldn't be in prison. I personally take their case and I file writs to help them get out, or I help their lawyers. Certain things that their lawyers might not see, I tell them, this is what you do. And we've successfully gotten people out of prison. We speak on a parole board for those that have a chance. And so we speak on a parole board, and the parole board listen to us, and they respect us enough to say, you're right, and they'll let them be free. 2 weeks ago, we just got a guy out, helped a guy get out that has been in prison for like 34 years. The big thing we're trying to do in 2023 is to get some houses so that we can start our reentry program, so that guys could come back and come to the houses, and we could help them reacclimate themselves with society, teach them all the skills that they need, get them all the stuff that they need to be ready. And if they just choose to stay in the house, they can stay in the house after the time that we're gonna need with them, because we're need 3 weeks to train them, to get them ready to just be on their own. And so that's the big thing that we're pushing for this year. We're in meditation and prayers about that being a success, because if it does, we could really do a lot of more things, and we can help people a lot more with legal representation, because there are people that's in prison that shouldn't be in prison. I mean, we got a case for a female. She's been incarcerated for 26. Next month will be 27 years. She was a pregnant mother. She already had 3 kids, and she was 6 months pregnant when a female stabbed her. And she shot one time, and the female died that stabbed her. And she received a life sentence for it. And she's been incarcerated for 26 years, going on 27. So we're fighting to get her free. That's a person that she didn't do it with malice. So her crime doesn't fit the time that she received. So those type of cases are the cases that we try to get, because not everybody's going to be innocent that we're going to help, but some of them, their crime doesn't actually match the life sentence that they received. Like another person, their case we're working on, there's a guy that received a life sentence for marijuana. Marijuana is legal in most states, but here in Louisiana, they enhance your sentence and give you a life sentence for it. And so we're trying to help these type of people come home. And so we dedicate ourselves to just helping people that shouldn't be incarcerated. We just got a guy out of prison who was in prison on attempted murder, and he was nowhere in the city when it happened. So we was able to successfully get him free. So we doing things on a small scale, but we want it to be bigger, but we doing what we can do, because my organization is kind of small at this point, but it's actually larger than people would think it is. But we want it to be bigger. So we I'm doing what I can do to make it bigger, because it's an organization that I found, so it has my heart, and I'm doing everything that I can, and I'm doing everything I can to help people. So that's what PICE is.
Thank you so much. We would also love if you could perhaps, if we could discuss ways, that we can support your work from afar, because we do live in many countries around the world, but are there any ways that you believe that, we can support your work and help you in that mission?
Oh, yes. I mean, donations are always welcome, because the work that we do, it takes money, because you got to travel. It takes money to go buy transcripts. It takes money to put writs in court, and it takes money to help guys, that's women and men, that's returning home from society that needs a phone. Because we do everything we can, and most of the things we do is out of pocket. We haven't received a lot of grants, so donations are always welcome. And just the support of, like we doing this campaign for Tony Booth, just the support of getting that out, and just teaming up with us to bring her story to the world, so that the world can judge her, and the world can see that, man, if I was in that same situation, any woman that's carrying a kid, what would you do in that situation if a woman that stabbed you, and you protecting this infant in your, not even this baby in your belly? We just need the world to see it, so that the world can sympathize, and we can put pressure on our district attorney here in Shreveport to look at this woman's case and free her, because she didn't do it with malice. It was not intentions, which the second-degree murder statute says that anybody who kills someone with specific intent to kill or cause great bodily harm, that's a second-degree murder. It wasn't that, because she was defending herself, and anybody that's defending themselves shouldn't be punished. This woman has been incarcerated for 26 years. So those are things that we really need help with, because now I've done all the paperwork, but she still needs legal representation. So I'm trying to raise the money from my paycheck to get her a lawyer, to pay for a lawyer. So, we need help just getting her an attorney, because if we open the doors for her, we open the doors for so many other people who actually were defending themselves that's incarcerated. So, like I say, donations are always needed and welcome, and just the team effort of everyone coming together to support us and bringing light to some of these situations, because some of these situations here in Louisiana wouldn't happen in other states, and people hear them and see them, be like, man, this person has been incarcerated for this long, but that shouldn't happen. And so those are the things that we really, really need help with. And I appreciate you for asking that, Ms. Caitlin, because we definitely welcome any support that we can get from anybody.
Okay, great. Yes, if you could share that information in the chat so people know where to go, that would be great. And then I think Betsy, I think it's maybe we can take Q&A
Got
now.
some questions. Is it okay, Terrence? We have a couple of questions in the queue for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thanks very much. Bruce, you had your hand up.
Yes, I want to start with a big thanks too. We are all, I think, sometimes frustrated by our legal system and our attempts to make it work better for the justice of people of color and for all. And the energy that you're giving us really helps us as we get to the end of 2022 and look forward into the coming year. Thank you so much for that. We want to learn a little bit more about what's going on in Louisiana. And we know that there was an amendment proposed to the Louisiana Constitution, Amendment number 7, and it didn't make it in the midterm elections. And if you were willing to tell us anything you know about what happened with Amendment 7, that would be great too.
Okay. The guy who actually drew up Amendment 7 is he's my friend. He's been my friend since I was 13 years old. The guy, the representative that he got to sponsor the bill, and I don't mean to sound in no way bad towards anybody, but I'm gonna call it how it is. This guy was the worst person to get to sponsor the bill because he was the epitome of a Sambo. The Republicans headed by a lawyer from Shreveport. I'm from Shreveport. They got a Republican lawyer here who's very powerful. He's also a senator. He contacted the guy that sponsored the bill and said, "You're gonna kill that bill. I don't care how you do it, but you're gonna kill that bill." And so the guy wanted a position, some president position on one of these committees. So Seaball said, "You got that. Now kill it." So this guy went on a personal crusade to say, the bill is wrong. Vote no on the bill. And they got a few more grassroots organizations headed by blacks to do the same thing. So the Republicans was giving them $10,000, $10,000. The organization $10,000 to go on the campaign to get black people not to vote for it. And that's what they did. So they sabotaged it. And so they worded it so ambiguously that people kind of like got lost in the language. So they didn't know exactly, should I vote for it or should I vote against it? And people were saying, vote against it. Vote against it. You don't understand it, vote against it. And so it got some kind of ways, it got lost in translation, but in more ways than not, the rug was pulled from under it by the sponsor, because a lot of people saying, if he's not going for it, why should we go for it? So that's why it happened the way it happened.
Thanks very much, Terrence. We also have another question from Yael Daniele. Would you like to speak, Yael Daniele?
Yes. Hi. Thanks for sharing with us, and thanks for being so open. I have a question. How coordinated are you with other similar organizations around the country and, in fact, around the world? Because I know, for example, I served as chair several times of the NGO Alliance for Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice at the United Nations. And there are a lot of activities that are definitely related. So it's a sort of two questions. One is, how coordinated are you? Are you interested in being coordinated? Because I know that local problems need local solutions, but and yeah, if you leave us your particulars in the chat, I can give you lots of those kind of connections. But do you feel that may support you or not? Because it's not necessarily about the slavery loophole. It's about conditions in prisons. And because most people incarcerated are Blacks, it goes together, so to speak. We had a special working group on women who are pregnant and give birth in prisons. So it's sort of like, whatever. What do you think of what I'm saying?
I think thank you, first of all, for making the suggestions that you did. And my organization is, man, we are so willing to work with any and everybody. We welcome the opportunity to work with people, and we really would love to work with people that's outside of our location, because people here, it's scary to work with people here because you don't know what they're gonna do. They can say that they're gonna work with you and then get in and just sell you out, and it'll just kill everything, kill your whole drive and your momentum. Because, like I say, the slavery mentality continues here. And so whatever people can do to sabotage your work and make your work look bad is done. So we would love and welcome the opportunity to work with anybody. I'm gonna put all my information in. I'm gonna put my information in the chat like y'all asked. But, oh yes, as far as with the women, people in this country, and I'm gonna speak to my the hip hop generation and the hip hop genre of things, because that's like our most powerfulest voice. When you hear rappers speaking about free someone that's incarcerated, it's always a male. And we don't look at the numbers of women, the rise of women being incarcerated, at how alarmingly how high it's become. So it's like free such and such, free such and such, and it's male. Not thinking about free this female because she's been incarcerated for twice as long for something that she shouldn't be incarcerated for. So working with groups and organizations that speaks about women having kids in prison and just women incarcerated, period, or other areas that we would love to join forces with people, because a lot of more women are reaching out to us because of what we're doing for Tawana Kelly, which her alias is Tony Boo. Like I said, I started a campaign for her. So I've used the hip hop community. So we have songs and videos talking about her, but we're really trying to soften the heart of our lead DA so that he could look at her case and get her free. But like I say, I'm gonna put my information in the chat, because we welcome the opportunity to work with other organizations.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Terrence. We really appreciate your being here and answering these questions. We know that Kenneth is here now, so we're going to have to move on. But please put your information in the chat box, because looks like people want to donate. People want to make connection with you. Thank you so much. Okay,
Thank you.
Antar.
Yo. Yeah, so hold on, I'm just trying to
You're going the wrong direction.
arrange myself.
You're in the wrong.
I'm on the wrong document altogether. All right, now I'm on the correct document, scanning for my next. Okay, now. Okay, so thank you to Terrence for that. Thank you to Betsy for transitioning, and thank you for Caitlin for finagling this MacBook Air. So I would now like to introduce Miss Kenneth Henry, the Legislative Director for the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, one of the oldest advocacy organizations for reparative justice in the United States. Kenneth is not only a leader and mentor, but also a modern civil rights fighter. We have Kenneth to thank for the 217 confirmed yes votes for the House Reparations Study Bill, H.R. 40, gathered this congressional session, the highest number as ever achieved in its over 32 years of existence. She also coordinated with our DA-DNC reps to push for our resolution to reaffirm support for a reparations commission, which was passed unanimously in the 2022 DNC winter meeting. Today, she's here to speak on the next steps for closing the slavery loophole, the background behind Amendment 7, why it failed, and chances of its passage if it's reintroduced. She'll also share with us where this fight fits in with the broader reparations movement and why we need to look at reparative solutions to the harm caused in the U.S. prison system. Kenneth, the floor is yours.
Okay. Can you hear me? I see a message that says unmute myself to speak.
Yeah, we can hear you, Kenneth.
Thank you. So first of all, please accept my apologies. This time difference confuses old people. So I have to apologize that I was not here at the beginning. And Antar, thank you so much for your very kind introduction. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the space and an opportunity to talk about what can be done to close the loophole. After I got the invitation to do this, I actually did some research, and it's amazing that the language in the states that have the except clause is very, very ambiguous. That's the first thing. And I think I heard Mr. Nguyen talk about it. We have to do a better job of organizing and mobilizing our people so that they do understand the ambiguities of the legislation that's written, as well as what's on the books. But they also need to understand what's behind such actions as the except clause. For example, for every 100,000 population in this country strong, there are about 1,245 incarcerated people of African descent. On average, and depending upon where you look, it may be a bit more, a bit less, but on average, anyone who does the air quotes force-free labor earns about 86 cents a day. On a situation where the bottom line annually is a generation of about $14 billion for the recipients of that free, near free labor, which we should all just go ahead and call sharecropping or leased labor or whatever else you want to call it. Again, 86 cents a day generates about $14 billion worth of business. Also in my research, I found that if you, as an incarcerated person, decide that you do not wish to participate in this air quotes forced labor, it comes with a price. It comes sometimes with a very severe price. It may be that your visitation rights are cut, or they're eliminated, telephone privileges cut or eliminated. And two of the worst that I found in my research is they actually put people in solitary confinement for refusing to go earn 86 cents a day. How egregious is that? I don't want to go earn 86 cents a day. Okay, you're going to go into solitary confinement. Or I don't know how true this is, but I actually found incidents where you, as the incarcerated person, stood to be punished by some form of beating or some other physical form of punishment. There are 3 states who have elected to, prior to the November election, there are 3 states who actually did the right thing. They removed the except clause from their legislation. 2 of the states actually just said, hey, we don't want it in our legislation. And 1 state said, well, we don't want it there, but, and I'm gonna read this to you. In the state of Utah, while they removed the slavery clause, they said, but it does not apply to otherwise lawful and administration of the criminal justice system. Now, what does that mean? Again, back to Mr. Nguyen, we have to be able to come up with teams of folk who can help us to be able to find our way through the murkiness of the way that legislation is written. And I heard Mr. Nguyen. I thank him so very much. It would be an honor and a pleasure to eventually one day meet him in person. I had a 45-minute conversation with the bill sponsor of the accept legislation in Louisiana. And he told me the reason it was being, he was on a campaign to ask for it to be voted down is because it didn't reflect his true sentiment of what he wanted to speak to. And because I don't live in Louisiana, I've only passed through Louisiana a couple of times. I found it easy for me to say what I said to him, and that was, you, sir, are the elected official. You, sir, the people have put their confidence in you for you to deliver good public policy. And what I hear you saying is, this is a horrible bill, but you, sir, wrote the bill. So what does that say as far as you as a qualified elected official? And he said, well, I was really, really busy doing a lot of things, and I didn't really pay attention to what I was writing. And I said, well, if that's the case, then next year when you're up for re-election, maybe the people should also look at you and decide whether or not you're the person who needs to be in that seat. So when we talk about the closing the loophole, not just to slavery, but to the other egregious things that we have to deal with as people, one of the things is we have to stop pulling the lever over and over and over for the same person. We have to stop allowing them to come in our communities and pat us on the back and, you know, pick up a baby or two and do a photo op and go on to the next community. We have to vet them. We have to ask them the really hard, difficult questions about what are you going to do for, what are you going to do for the people? And here are the things that the people need you to be responsive to and to make a change in. So he said, you know, I promise you, I'm going to write the perfect piece of legislation next year. Now, you all have been around for a long time, some of you. There is no such thing as the perfect piece of legislation. Now, you may write something and believe that it is the perfect piece of legislation, but when it's introduced, there is negotiating, there is bartering, there is, well, if you do this, I'm going to do this. And what you thought was a perfect piece of legislation is not the perfect piece. At that time, that's when you should say, well, this is not what I intended for it to be. And you have a fiduciary responsibility to go and to lobby your peers in the Senate, in the House, in Congress, wherever, and get them to agree that what you really want isn't what this bill turned out to be. In this case, in Louisiana, this person had bipartisan support. I mean, he didn't just have one Republican, he had bipartisan support on this bill that wasn't the bill that he wanted it to be. The other part of what I said to him was, if we as people of African descent vote this bill down, what we're saying is that we as people of African descent are politically challenged, that we are legislatively incompetent, and that we do not know how to go and read a bill and decide whether or not it was written for the benefit of the people. And therefore you, sir, the bill sponsor, now must come back and decide that this is a horrible piece of legislation. I have my notes. Anybody who wants, I can send you a copy of my notes. I spoke to him for 45 minutes and he just, he dug his heels in. No, it's not. It's just not the right piece of legislation. I only want to introduce good, perfect legislation. To be honest with you, and I said the same thing to him, I feel some kind of way about this, sir. And what I felt was, I felt that he had probably been approached, and I don't know what he may or may not have been offered. So this is me just pontificating right now. I don't know what he may have been offered or not offered, or if there's something else he aspires to do next year, and may not even be running for office. The positive thing about the outcome was 400,000+ people voted to be rid of the accept clause. Not enough of them, but that was a positive message. And I told him that the people on the other side who do not want to see the accept clause removed, they're going to declare a victory at our loss. And he said, but when I come back next year, I'm going to fix it, and on and on and on. I promise you. And I told him the same thing. I'm going to ride you next year, because we need and deserve better than what we get from our elected officials. That's just straight up. How does this impact us? Well, again, of every 100,000 in the population in this country, over 1,200 are people of African descent, and they're incarcerated. And they're the ones who do the work for 86 cents a day, and it generates over $14 billion worth of business for our corporations, our state agencies, and anyone else who wants to get involved. So what do we have to do to plug the loophole for slavery? Let me talk about Alabama for a minute before we move forward. Alabama was one of the 5 states that decided they were going to remove the accept clause, and each state has an amendment. I don't know the amendment in Alabama, so it's the accept clause. What happened in Alabama, per some of my highly very active political friends who also have held state office, etc., they told me that in order to remove the accept clause, it was written in such a way that the state gave up the right to offer free public education. So again, we have to, grassroots, it has to start at the grassroots level. We have to organize, we have to mobilize, and we have to be able to go out and to hold meetings, even if it's on the corner somewhere. We have to be able to hold meetings and to help people to understand what is at stake. Just imagine the state of Alabama had to give up access to free public education. Do you know how many people are impacted by access to free public education? We're not just talking about people who live in this country who are citizens. Anybody who comes in this country can walk into a schoolhouse and get public education. So if it starts in Alabama, we now need to be on our guard to make sure, whether it's the accept clause or some other piece of legislation, we need to be on our guard to make sure that it's not the beginnings of, maybe the overturn of Brown v. the Board of Education or some other piece of legislation. I know it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. And it just takes a lot of commitment. But again, to just know that in Alabama, they had to forfeit the right to access to free public education. If my friends are correct, I trust them. They've been in the game for years and years and years, and I don't believe that they would have misled me on something so important. In Louisiana, I got involved with this because I am, as Antar said, a member of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. We have local chapters in Louisiana, and they wanted somebody to help them to be able to determine whether it was a piece of legislation they should get behind or not. I worked relentlessly helping them to understand and to get them to a point where they actually had decided, yes, we're behind this. 3 weeks before the election, the Advocate, I think that's the newspaper, comes out and says that the bill sponsor is saying, vote it down, vote it down, vote it down. We then decided, because we think we really know how to do this, we started calling the NGOs and the companies and organizations that are of people of African descent, asking them to help us to convince the bill sponsor that we needed to let the bill go through and he needed to drop his campaign. We discovered that they were standing with the bill sponsor. They were saying, if the bill sponsor says this, then this is how we're going to go. So we're supporting him. Again, we have to have people who are willing to stand up against our elected officials, call them out, and let them know the ramifications of not doing what is in the best interest of the people. And having said that, I have to talk a little bit about HR 40. Yes, we have 217 co-sponsors on HR 40, 23 on the Senate companion bill. We have sent massive numbers of signatures and letters to the White House, to House administration, and it has gotten us nowhere. So we also have to understand and appreciate that this is not something that happens overnight. It's not something that can happen, in an hour or so. As Antar said, NCOBRA has been on the forefront of pushing for reparatory justice. And HR 40 is just a commission, a $20 million commission. This country does commissions all the time. Until more people are standing strong, shoulder to shoulder, and not just people of African descent, this is something that is going to have massive solidarity across all ethnic lines. It can't just be me out here talking about reparatory justice. What will reparations and reparatory justice bring? Well, first of all, reparations is more than a paycheck. One of NCOBRA's main concerns is mass incarceration. We need to be able to deal with mass incarceration as a part of our sitting to the table to talk about reparations. Sure, reparations can be individual reparations, but the bulk of it must be community-based. Community-based means that we are dealing with incarceration, we're dealing with the ambiguity of the different states and their accept clauses. We're dealing with the fact that if I send you out for 8 hours and you work 8 hours, you deserve more than 86 cents a day. Even the most evil, mean-spirited person has to agree. People deserve more than 86 cents a day. And what does this do as far as the accept clause is concerned? It decimates communities. It destroys families. If I'm incarcerated and I'm working and I'm getting 86 cents a day and my family is struggling, I should not be getting 86 cents a day. We have to say that 86 cents a day, the accept clause, all of that has to go. And if you want me to work, then give me a livable wage that I can then send home to my family and help to support my families, not have me, and I know somebody's going to say, well, they committed a crime, then that's where they need to be. Okay, I'm behind bars, but that doesn't mean that you want my family to be behind bars also. My family needs to be able to go on and to be progressive, supportive members of the communities that they live in. And if they are in situations where they do not have the level of support that they need because the family member is incarcerated, earning 86 cents a day, that is, it's slavery. I don't care how you look at it. It's convict leasing, and we know the story behind convict leasing. For example, let's just talk about it just for a minute. In the great state of Alabama, Alabama used convict leasing for 83% of their operating budget for over 50 years. That means that if you looked wrong, you were sent to some camp to work, and mostly a lot of the folks who were in those camps did not walk away from them. They worked, they died. They worked in those camps and they died. So nothing has changed. It is the perpetuation of the what has always been the situation: convict leasing, the Black codes, Jim Crow laws, separate and unequal. And if we, the people, do not come together and stand strong and say that we are not going to allow this to happen, also because of the ambiguity from state to state, we have to figure out how best to be able to send a message to those states. It's straightforward. You take it off the books and you have something that says something as basic as that the states will no longer have any kind of slavery or anything that represents slavery. It will not support it, and it will therefore no longer exist. It's just a straight statement, nothing that says in exchange for it, we're going to lose the right to access to public education. So how do we close the loop? We close the loop by becoming mobilized. We organize ourselves, we become mobilized. We also become more aware of what the legislation is. And when we find out that, as an example, in Louisiana, I told all of the local chapters about the conversation I had with the bill sponsor. We have to do more of that. We have to put it out there. We have to use social media. And we have an amazing friend in Caitlin Kennedy who will craft an article. All you have to do is just say, Caitlin, I got a story for you. So we have to make our elected officials know that we are serious. We are not going to play these games of you come in my community, you pat me on the back, you hold the baby, you do a photo op and you're gone. No, excuse me, sir. We need you to step over here. We have questions for you. Excuse me, ma'am, we have questions for you. If you do not get the answers you need, then here's the hard part. A lot of people who are qualified to run for office don't run for office. Why don't they run for office? They don't have the money. In California, the mayoral election in Southern California, in Los Angeles, the loser, I don't mean that in a negative way, the losing candidate spent billions and billions, not billions, millions, sorry, millions and millions of dollars to become the mayor of Los Angeles, millions and millions of dollars. And I'm not saying that you don't want to spend some money, but a lot of folk are intimidated when they think that they're going to have to go up against someone who's spending lots and lots of money.
Kenneth, I'm so sorry, we're running out of time now.
Okay. I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you.
We are so grateful to you. Thank you so much for your wonderful comments. We really appreciate it. And we have, I just wanted to ask Mr. Nguyen, does he have also a closing comment? We're very grateful for Kenneth's comment. Terrence, do you have one closing comment, just very short?
Okay, in closing, I would like to say that, we got a motto here that says, when we fight, we win. And in prison, we got a motto that says, never give up. When you combine those two mottos, it states that you really can't give up because we got to fight to win. In Louisiana, we really need the support of outsiders to really give people here the balance and the view to understand that in order for us to win, we got to come together. We got to put our differences to the side to really kind of like make this system a better system, because the system has survived on the backs of humans. And the only way that we can change it is if we just come together. So once again, Pipes is open to working with anyone, and we welcome everyone to come aboard and just try to help us make the changes that we can make within the small parts of our state. So I thank y'all.
Thank you, Terrence, and thank you again, Kenneth. We so much appreciate your speaking to us this evening. Over to Bruce.
Thanks very much, Betsy. And a little surprise, I'm going to say over to Jazz. I'd like Jazz, to give the comments for the Global Black Caucus.
Thank you, Bruce, and hello and good day, everybody throughout the world. A huge thank you to the Global Progressive Caucus for organizing this touching, important, informative, and yes, necessary event with the amazingly knowledgeable guest speakers of honor, Kenneth, Henry, and Terrence Nguyen. Awareness of the slavery loophole grew following the murder of George Floyd in May 2020, which prompted many white Americans to see in real time how Black Indigenous people of color are systemically treated by law enforcement. The United States cannot in good faith confront the legacy of chattel slavery while still permitting vestiges of that economy to persist. Dehumanization allowed for the evils of the chattel slavery. Dehumanization allows slavery and involuntary servitude to continue under the guise of a carceral state. The words in our constitutions matter, and people who are incarcerated remain people. Thus, what we allow to happen behind those walls says more about our humanity than anything that they have done. Let's recognize clearly that the slavery loophole is the foundation of America's misdemeanor problem, which exposes how our country's history of racial injustice evolved into an enormous abuse of criminal justice power. We heard also earlier on 13 million people each year, most of them poor and people of color, are abused by this system. After the Civil War and after abolition, Southern states repurposed their misdemeanor systems to criminalize and control the African-American labor pool. They arrested them and charged them with minor crimes, punishing them with fines they could not pay in order to lock them up and sell them back to private industry. The mechanism that they used is one that we still, and sadly, still see today. That private industry acted as a surrogate. Today's misdemeanor system brings in $80 billion per year in fines and fees. More than 90% of every dollar goes to public institution, public courts, and prosecutors' offices. Just to name a few: district attorneys, court administration, clerk offices, police transport, booking, and so much more. Daily operations become a profit marketing system. People are charged for their incarceration. Daily necessities become a way institutions and private businesses make money. Cafeteria meals, trays, utensils, commissary, medical care, phone calls to loved ones, uniforms, and laundry all come at a cost. And many times it's the people who are incarcerated who are paying the price. Just to round this off, there was a very, very great heartfelt message from our DNC chair, Harrison. And I will read an excerpt out of this because I think this will sum it up a little bit more and all the work that we all together are doing. There were a lot of predictions about how the midterm elections of 2020 would play out. They said history wasn't on our side, but for nearly 2 years, I've been given the same response. We were going to make our own history. That's exactly what we did. That's exactly what you did. At every level, you helped elect Democrats. Now that every ballot has been cast and counted, thank you for everything you've given to your party and your country. Because of you, President Biden has signed into law landmark legislation. Because of you, every single Democratic senator running for re-election won, plus Pennsylvania elected John Fetterman. Because of you, we increased the number of Democratic governors. Because of you, we held the Republicans to a thin majority in the House that will help us to hold them accountable over the next 2 years. And because of you, we beat back a red wave of MAGA Republicans who sought to set the progress of the country back by decades. And how did we do this? We never lost focus on what mattered. We spent the last 2 years investing in our state parties and infrastructure. In every single community, you found a Democrat putting in the work. We didn't go home and stay quiet after Election Day 2020. We were out there fighting for voting rights, registering voters, and getting them out to the polls. We were showing that true leadership looks like through public service in all its forms. We were delivering. And as this year winds down, I know many of you still take a much-deserved break, but that doesn't mean we're done. You're not just a Democrat on Election Day. Every day of the year, you are showing your values and serving your communities. And that's exactly why it is so important for all of us to cast our votes from abroad as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jess. And now the final word goes to Antar Keith.
Hi, everybody. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the next events that I have for the RTF in the chat box. So hopping off of what Jazz said, you know, it's important to vote, but it's also important to hold these people accountable to the promises they make to us in exchange for our voting power and our voting capital. One of those promises is the age-old promise to create a federal reparations commission. It's been getting much more traction since the slaughter of George Floyd. Now's the time to really hold the Democratic Party to this promise, because HR 40 is nearing its sunset, and we cannot let them use our lives and our history and our pain for their position. They must exchange that vote with action. So what we're going to do is we're going to have an RTF meeting in a few days. We're going to be strategizing and working with people in our coalition, the coalition that Kenneth is a part of. And, you know, Terrence, if you have the availability and the time, we would, of course, you know, love to have you as well. We're also going to be having an event on January 28th, a so-called meeting of the minds with former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner and the top reparations scholar in America, Dr. William Sandy Darity. You know, there's lots of, you know, discussion about some of the ways his philosophy vibes with certain reparationists in the movement. We're going to see if we can find some understandable ground as this movement kicks up more steam in 2023 and in 2024, where it will come to a head. So please join us. Also follow us on Facebook. And thank you again, everybody. Back to the people running this show.
Bruce, would you like, thank you so much, Antar. Bruce.
Yes, I want to thank everybody who has made this an excellent event today. And I want all of you to know that we are going to take that energy that you have shared with us into 2023, a year during which more states take steps to close the slavery loopholes in their constitutions, the practice of profiting from incarcerated labor ends, and ensuring that our criminal justice system is reformed in other ways to ensure racial justice and justice for all. That is what Pro-DA means with its own holiday message. Let us truly love in 2023, including active support for candidates, policies, and movements that put people and our planet before profits and power for the few. That will guide our work as 2022 comes to an end and the new year begins. And as you can see, our Vice Chair Sue Alksness has offered some details of where we are going as we enter the new year. We hope that you will join us and that together we can make the new year one that is far better for all of us. With that, we're going to end the recording, end the live streaming, and wish all of you a great day and evening, no matter where you are around the world.